The Men in Black, are they real or just legend? Join Speaking of Spirits as we dive into this story. Hey everyone, this is Colleen and Kelly with Speaking of Spirits. And today we thought we would do, this was an episode that you wanted to do, Kelly, on the Men in Black.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I found, well, we covered the UFO things, and so I figured the Men in Black fit into that, so I thought we'd cover that.
Kind of a natural progression of discussion points here. And I think if we were talking before the episode, right, is that if you scour the internet, you'll find the same stories regurgitated over and over and over and over and over. But if you haven't looked at some of this information, was the earliest sighting of the Men in Black in 1947? Is that what you found?
Yeah, that was the first one in 1947 with Harold Dahl in in Puget Sound on Murray Island.
Yeah, so when I was reading through this, so that was the alleged the first sighting of the Men in Black, right? So he and his son are out scooping up logs in the bay and off of their boat, and then they see this object and it breaks apart, or it has pieces break off of it. He goes and he tells his boss or a friend of his, and who then allegedly went out into the water or that bay and saw the same thing.
And he did get photos of him, of the object, but when they went to get it developed, they were basically ruined by radiation, supposedly. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was him, his son, and two other guys doing a conservation mission out there, and that's when they saw it. And so the ship they saw started breaking apart, and chunks of the ship came down and hit the boat, and a part of it burned his son's arm, and they had a dog with them too, and a piece hit that dog, and unfortunately the dog didn't make it, so they ran out of there. And he got pictures of it, and he went to show his supervisor, and his supervisor was like, nah, no such thing. And then he went out there and he saw the same thing. So the next day, Dahl was visited by a man in a black suit who was like, hey, let's go out to breakfast and talk this thing over. The man in black told him about the whole event in excruciating detail, just like he was there and he never met this man before. And right before,
so the Men in Black, they showed up at his house.
Yep, just one.
Okay,
just one guy showed up to his house and said, "Let's go to breakfast and talk this over."
Oh, interesting.
So they finished up breakfast, and the guy said, "What I said is proof that uh, UFOs are real, and I know a lot more of this than you do, and I don't want you to ever talk about it again. He got up and left, and they never saw him again.
Was it after that he came out and said the whole thing was a hoax? Was that because he was so scared?
Maybe I didn't come across that part, but I did find something interesting though. Um, his son that was with him just up and disappeared.
What?
Yep, they found him later in Montana as a waiter. And when they found him and talked to him about the experience. He he had no idea how he got there.
Wow, that's bizarre. I have not run into that information yet. So, was his son present during this breakfast?
No.
No. That's bizarre. So yeah, you got to wonder if this guy, Man in Black, visited him, Harold, and told him not to talk about the incident. I wonder if because his boss allegedly went out and saw the same thing, right? The same object.
Hmm.
And
And two
so,
other and two other
into,
workers.
I wonder if they were ever visited but never
They
talked about it.
they were,
They
because the
were.
two workers that were with Dahl in his boat, uh, they never talked about the incident again. They were just like, nope, we're done. And then his
Yeah.
son just up and
Disappears.
disappearing, and then showing back up in Montana, and has no idea how he got there. But he's like, oh, I've been working here for years, but I don't know how I got here. It's really bizarre. But it's alleged that these men in black can essentially wipe your memory and just put you somewhere, and you're like in the movie, and they just zap your brain,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh
Right.
yeah, you're a waiter and you've been working here for years. Goodbye.
Well, I mean, so if the movie, so if people who don't know that, what is there, a 20-year-old movie out now, right, of the
Yeah,
Men in Black, and
almost.
almost 20, yeah, and so it blows my mind how time goes by, Um, they do that in the movie. They can wipe. They have a thing, and they can wipe someone's memory
The
of the
the
incident.
yeah, the neuralizer, the little pin thing.
Yeah, yeah, the little pin thing. So that's not. I mean, so that's the most infamous Men in Black story. It's the first story that I guess that comes out really, but certainly not the last. So we
No.
have what the next one. Why don't you go ahead and talk about Albert Bender?
So Albert Bender, um, he pretty much brought the Men in Black phenomenon and put it on the map. It took off from there. So he was a resident of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and he had a fascination with the strange and unusual, and up to the point of it was an obsession of his. In 1947, he was living on the top floor of a three-story house with a stepfather for company, which top floor of a three-story house is essentially the attic. Um, the more time he spent up in that attic, the more he became a loner. Um, and he pretty much locked himself away, and he was always looking through paranormal books and newspaper clippings and magazines. And he also liked Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley, Edgar Allan Poe, and he had a deep fascination with the occult.
Mm.
But yeah, after a while, Albert started getting problems with his mental health. And one day he just decided to paint his upstairs attic with gross, bizarre pictures of like demonic faces.
Mm.
Um, and eventually he started displaying clear symptoms of OCD. And let's see. In 1950, with all his paranormal UFO information, he started to collate and cross-reference reports and stories that came along. And what did I do?
Well, he started, didn't he originally, he started like in 1952. So Harold Dahl, that sighting was 47. And then Albert comes along in 52, and he starts a magazine called the Space Review.
Yep, he started
And
that.
yeah, and the International Flying Saucer Bureau. So
Yeah, he
I thought
started.
that was fascinating.
Yeah, he started that. And in July 30th, 1952, he got a phone call at his house. His dad wasn't there at the time, but he answered the phone and he didn't hear anybody over the phone, but he knew somebody was listening. So a little bit after that, he got a massive spinning and throbbing in his head, and he went and laid down. After which, a couple days later, he went and saw a movie at the local theater, and while he was there, he got the most, what is it, anxious and foreboding feeling while he was in the theater. And out of the corner of his eye, oh no, wait, I fast forwarded a little bit.
So
So
while you're looking,
he went
go
and
ahead.
saw a movie, and he got the feeling that he was being watched on his walk home. As he came home and he went upstairs to his attic, he saw an eerie glow coming out. He could see an eerie glow underneath the door to his room, and he could smell the smell of sulfur. And when he opened the door, there was a bright shimmering light in his room. And when he flicked the light on, it just disappeared. Now, Albert, being Albert with OCD, if you know anybody with OCD and you invade their personal space, it freaks him out. So he just checked everything. And what he noticed is that someone or something was shuffling through his files, his UFO files. Now,
So let me ask you this. So this was after he kind of he painted all this stuff on his walls, and after this, it almost sounds like some mental health issues going on there because he started doing these kind of odd things. And I'm not trying to put OCD as this is a huge mental health crisis, but I'm saying he was painting some weird stuff on his walls. He was
yeah,
becoming more and more of a loner. So there's definitely some psychological issues going on.
yeah, I'm not a doctor, but if I had to hazard a guess, I would say it was the onset of schizophrenia.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. But at the same time, he was also publishing this magazine, and he's publishing UFO stories that he's gathering from all over the place, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he's got that going on. So he's not completely he's with it enough that he's doing some work, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a beautiful mind scenario, right? Because he's doing a lot of work, but there's definitely something going on.
There's some weird stuff starting to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So he flicks on the light. The light in the room disappears, but he knows somebody has been going through his files. Then in November of 1952, he went out again to the movies to see the latest sci-fi flick. And while he was sitting there, he had the most foreboding, dreadful feeling that he was being watched. And out of the corner of his eye, he saw a man in black, just materialize a couple seats down from him, just poof into existence. And he turned to look at him, and the man in black turned and looked at him, and he had glowing eyes like flashlights. Looked at Albert. Albert immediately got sick. The nausea, almost vomiting. He closed his eyes to kind of like stave it off. And when he opened his eyes, he was gone again. The guy was gone. So Albert was like, well, where'd he go? And he turned his head to look, really apprehensively, like, oh God. And he turned to look, and he saw the guy behind him again. And again, he got hit with that dreadful, awful fight or flight kind of feeling. And he was like, nope, I'm out of here. And he got up and he left. And when he got home, let's see. When he got home, his health was starting to get worse and worse. And after that event, he started having poltergeist activity, sulfur smells, and other strange phenomenon going on in his house. And then
That seems so divergent of what happens though with the Men in Black. Like this sounds like haunting stuff, but you have the UFO stuff on this side. It's like there's two different things going on here, and I can't. You know what I'm saying?
it's all connected somehow.
Well, I mean, yeah, but most hauntings are not. They don't have a UFO component to them, so I'm trying to figure out. Um, Go
I
ahead.
don't know.
I,
But in 1953, three men in dark clothes visited Bender and told him the truth about UFOs, and they warned him to never speak of it ever again or face the consequences, which is you get disappeared. And in 1953, that's when he shut the whole the IFSB. He shut it down. And
International Flying Saucer Bureau, yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, he did shut it down. I did read that he kind of received like a cease and desist order from these Men in Black. Like you this is enough. You've done enough. Shut it down, and he did. I never read anything about that paranormal connection or the sulfur, and I think that's interesting. I'm not sure how that plays into it. I'm not saying at all that people that have that phenomenon going on in their house that there's a schizophrenic connection to it, but I'm wondering if that's not there's something psychologically going on with him. So was it caused by these visitations from the Men in Black, or I don't
I
know.
I found a maybe interesting connection. While this was going on, there was um, the Matt Gasser of Mattoon running around the same time while this was going on. And do you know about that story?
Mm-mm.
Super interesting. There was a town called Mattoon, Illinois, and around this time, I think it was 47, around this time, this whole town was terrorized by a person running around and essentially gassing people with some kind of nerve toxin. And 22 people were gassed in 2 weeks. And people have claimed to see a man, like a man in black, running around the town. Some lady saw a guy look in her window and then throw a canister in there, and some gas came out, and she was immediately nauseated, sick, lost. She was paralyzed. It's super interesting story. That's one of my favorites.
Interesting. So this, um,
So the
where,
sulfur connection, maybe I was thinking that the sulfur connection could have been like an attempt at a nerve gas for him, and
hmm,
then yeah, because maybe he breathed in some kind of nerve gas, and that just kind of
where did he
broke his
live?
brain, essentially.
Was he in the same town?
No,
No. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I think it's interesting that if I mean, he started a magazine, the Space Review, and he started this little bureau and he's publishing all this stuff, but at the same time he seems like his mental health was really starting to suffer. Um but so I don't know, is it like the chicken and the egg? Was his mental health suffering and then he had these visitations, or were these visitations causing his mental health to suffer? I don't
yeah,
know. Mm.
I don't
So,
know. Yeah, I don't know if it's real or not, but I find it super interesting that he's already got that OCD brain of just everything in its place, run, 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 and then doing the magazine. I mean, his brain's under enough stress as it is, and then this
yeah.
this
The
visitation just sent him over the edge,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
then all these sulfur smells or something like that. I'm thinking maybe that gave him some kind of toxin that just made his mind even worse. Like I couldn't
Oh,
imagine getting dizzy spells and then having migraines just constantly. That would just suck.
right. Well, and some smells are associated with brain tumors, right? If you have a brain tumor, too, obviously there's a lot of headaches involved with that. And then you get smells, you get different scents that are associated with tumors. So who knows what was going on. But I did see that UFO witnesses that have come forward, and I guess there's been a few documented cases of these men in black visiting UFO witnesses to the phenomenon, that when they come forward, usually they say they're in groups of two or three when they're visited by these men in black. Usually there's one talker in the group. Some say they are not talked to at all. It's like it's a mind talking thing. Like they're not actually speaking, but you're hearing them
Yeah,
speak.
some kind of telepathy. Yeah.
Like telepathy, yeah. And then they can never really describe facial features. Like
Oh, that
afterwards, you're trying to describe the men in black. They can never really tell you. Did they have brown hair and a beard? Did they like the facial features just disappear?
yeah, they I've ran across a couple of accounts, and there was another guy that was working on some UFO stuff after, I don't know if it was with Bender or after Bender quit, but he was working on something by himself at home, and he gets a phone call, and he answers the phone, and a voice over the line was like, asked him, "Is this so and so?" And he said, "Yes, this is he." And he's like, and the voice goes, "I want to talk to you about what you're working on." And he's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're working on this UFO stuff, right?" Right? And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, I'll see you in a few minutes." Hangs up the phone, and not 2 or 3 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. He opens the door, and there's a man in black standing there. And, this is way before cell phones, right?
Right, right.
So he's like, "Okay, well, that was fast." And, he's like, the man in black goes, "Can I come in?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah." And he's like, "I just want to talk to you about what you're working on." And so they sit and they talk for a while. And he notices that this man in black doesn't quite look human.
Hmm.
And matter of fact, the man in black takes his hand and wipes his mouth like that, and the guy notices that it's smeared like
The
lipstick, and
mouth.
that's yeah. He had, what did he say? He had really red lips, and he went like
Huh.
this, and wiped his mouth, and the guy noticed that those aren't lips, that's lipstick, and he had a slit to where his mouth
Oh,
should be.
so he's the alien. In other words,
And
he
yeah,
thinks. Yeah, yeah.
and to
Um.
make the story even weirder, the guy asked if he could see the penny in his pocket. And now, how would he know that he had a penny
No,
in his
that there's a.
pocket?
Well, other. Yeah, that's weird.
And so he takes it out, and he's like, "Hold it out in your hand." And he holds it out in his hand, and the man in black just looks at it, and it goes from copper to silver to blue, and then just vanishes. And
Hmm.
after that, the man in black goes, "Okay, I want you to stop working on what you're working on, otherwise face the consequences." And he said, "My energy is low. I need to go." So the guy shows him the door. The man in black walks out the door, turns and goes around the corner, and then a bright light just appears and he's gone. He went to go
Oh,
look. He went to go look. He saw the bright flash and he was just gone. So there's that story.
interesting. Well, in 1962, Albert released his own book after all of this stuff happened to him, called Flying Saucers and the Three Men, in which he said they floated about a foot off the floor.
Oh
They
yeah.
looked like clergymen and wore hats that had the Hamburg style hats. Their faces were not clearly discernible, because the hats kind of partially shaded their
Yep.
faces. And the eyes of all three figures suddenly lit up like flashlight bulbs and seemed to burn into my very soul as the pains above my eyes became almost unbearable. So they gave him a headache.
Yeah.
I thought that was fascinating. So something that ties kind of in with all of this. So remember the first sighting of the Men in Black, 1947, the Murray Island UFO incident. Well, who's born in 1947? Dan Aykroyd.
Yep.
And so people are like, Dan Aykroyd, how does this come along with Men in Black? But there's a link. There's a big link here. Go
Yeah.
ahead and talk a little bit about it.
From what I know, Dan Aykroyd was born in 1947, and his parents were paranormal investigators. And then his grandparents were into the occult. They held seances and all that good stuff. So there's that connection. And then he saw a UFO flying over the Hudson in New York.
That was a really, really, really huge event. There was thousands of people saw the Hudson River event. And that spawns a whole other incident that we'll bring up on another episode. There's a really famous incident that happened tied to the Hudson. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else? If
Well,
anybody,
so Dan, it's not to cut you off, but let's keep going with the Hudson thing. So Dan sees this Hudson River incident and this UFO sighting, along with 1,000 or more other people who saw this in New York, and so he was kind of inspired by all of this phenomenon. He was really into it. And he wanted to make a documentary on UFO sightings and the phenomenon around them and how people are affected by them. And he believes that he was visited by men in black, and basically they shut it down. They shut the documentary down right as it was going out and being marketed. I mean, this thing was done. It was a done deal. This is, Dan Aykroyd. He does all kinds of movie productions and acting and all kinds of stuff. So everybody, he's not going to have a problem marketing and selling this documentary that he's done. it's ready to go, and it is shut down, like done.
Wow, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, so he never released it because of the visitation bothered him so much. He was threatened somehow.
Yeah, apparently these men in black, they are terrifying. They just have this, the way they talk, this way, they're freaky looking, I guess. The way they talk is just slow, monotone, almost robotic. And when they tell you like like you need to shut it down or you go bye bye, people are gonna shut it down. But I think that's also that they look like government officials.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, grow up being told don't mess with the government.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. His production, I think he said, I'm looking back at my notes here, that they had like 8 episodes were finished and ready to air. And when he had that visitation and it freaked him out, production was immediately within, I guess the next day, production stopped. And they never aired any part of that. So I don't know that
I wonder if he still got them.
well, he's really involved still with like MUFON and all of these organizations out there. Dan Aykroyd goes to a lot of those conventions, and he's still a really big into the UFO networking and talking about sightings and working with people who have had sightings. But I don't know if he stopped doing any kind of production because of the threat that, or the perceived threat that he had. I don't know. I mean, I've never been visited by these people, so I wouldn't know. It seems to me like they're not, if based on a lot of different stories, they're not human. They're not government agents. They're not human.
They're not human. They're not
They're not
government
human.
agents.
No.
But a lot of conspiracy theorists say they're one and the same, because I mean they look alien. They do paranormal things, but they cover up UFO incidents under the guise that they work for the FBI or some kind of government facility. So
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think that, especially in today's age, the government is really incapable of holding any kind of secret whatsoever.
there might be a
So
government. There might be a government that is within our government that
I don't know,
does
shadow
this.
government, maybe. I tend to believe that they're probably not. They're not. I mean, if they have the power to do what they can do, then they've probably poofed the minds of people who are supposed to be working within the government on these projects.
Yeah,
So
and I think I came across a couple of other uh, stories that these people have been around forever, forever, forever. So anything like a major incident, and these people would show up and shut it down. Like, you're not going to talk about it again.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. So I've had my own things happen, particularly after being down in the Skinwalker area. But I've never been visited by the Men in Black. So,
Well, yeah, thank
and I'm
goodness for
still
that.
talking about them. I still talk about some of these incidents. So you know, who knows? I think maybe these sightings have gone away now that more and more is out there, that people are now. I mean, if you have, let's say, remember okay, let's go back to Hudson River. Hudson River had, I mean, there was like thousands of phone calls that came in during this night of UFOs. And so, and there was a really, really famous author involved with one of these sightings, and we can talk about that later. But, so you go from something like that, but pre-internet. So these pictures and these reports are going into various newspapers all around the Hudson River Valley, in New York State, about everything that people were seeing. But now it's instantaneous. If you have a photograph or a story, poof, it's all over the internet instantly. I mean, everybody's uploading it on Facebook, it's being shared, it's instant. So how can, before it was probably more, it's more containable, right? They just visit the house, they scare someone to never speak again. Now, what are you going to do? Visit 10,000 people in an instant? So I don't know that these things still happen.
Well, I think they still do, but once you put it on the internet, it's out there. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
They can't stop it. But
Right.
but if they are real and they are monitoring the internet, they just all they have to do is pose at someone and say, "This is fake. This is why," and that's it. But that could be just anybody. But
Yeah. Yeah. And we have that as a paranormal team. Like, we'll put out evidence that we collect from an investigation, and you'll have instantly all the naysayers going, you faked this, or you did that, or that's not what's happening, and blah, blah, blah. And they weren't there, so they don't know. And they don't know who we are, that we're never going to ever fake anything. We usually throw out 90% of what we catch because we don't. So there's always those naysayers. But there's always that segment of population that's going to watch this stuff too and say, I had something happen to me that's kind of similar, so I'm buying into this. So I don't know that these men in black, maybe they're still around. I doubt it. I doubt that they have the same amount of control.
Oh, I did run across a interesting story that is pretty recent about some campers that were up in the Brown Mountains. They were camping, young people partying, what have you, and they're partying and they see three men in black just come out of the forest, walk up to them, and of course, you see G-men in suits coming up to your campsite. You're like, oh, we are in trouble, because they were young, they were partying, and I think they said they had a bong just sitting out, and they're like, oh, we're going to jail. And these men show up, and two of them talked in that monotone robotic voice I guess they have, and asked them, did you see the lights? And they're like, no. And they're like, okay. And they just turned around and just walked back into the woods and disappeared.
Where are the Brown Mountains? Do you know?
I don't know exactly, but there's another UFO phenomenon that is famous, and that's the Brown Mountain Lights.
Okay.
So there's that connection.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe they're still out there. I don't know. Sometimes I'm weird, and I'd like to have. So I'm kind of like, I want to. Well, visit me then. But okay, maybe
I don't know
if
you want that, Colleen. I really don't.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe it'd change my life around because it's not going so well right now. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah. Never know. You might be sitting and watching TV, see a bright flash, and then a knock at your door, and they're like, "You want to go?"
All right. Well, anyway, I think it was a good topic, and I would love to hear from our viewers to see, have you guys been visited by any of these men in black? Or do you know somebody who has a story about men in black? I have no first person encounters. Like, none of my friends that I've ever talked to have ever had anything like this happen, even though they have seen things, UFO type stuff. So I don't know if it still happens, but it's interesting. Yeah. So,
Oh, I was gonna say, I did see the blacked out SUVs once when I was sitting at work, and it might have been something, could have been nothing, but I found it bizarre that
Oh,
these,
well, you guys do have nuclear stuff going on up where you work.
yeah, we got
There's,
that little
yeah,
collider up there. I just
yeah, yeah.
found it strange that two SUVs with highly tinted windows were
Hmm.
driving up ISU, and oh my god, the way they were driving, just I found it bizarre because they were not maybe that far away from each other, bumper to bumper, and they moved like a snake just going up the hill.
Yeah.
I, just, I
Well,
found
and
it bizarre.
so I've the black SUV thing still happens because uh, this was years ago when I lived in Texas. We had a truck come in. My uncle was a truck driver, and he drove in and out of the some of the nuclear test sites. And so, like in Tonopah, Nevada, and all these places, right? So he had a radiation badge. He had a helicopter above his rig the whole time. Never knew what he was carrying on the load. Was not allowed to have that information, but he had SUVs around the truck and a helicopter above it. So
Oh,
do the math, right? So in Texas, on 287, this little the highway that goes through Childress, we had we were sitting at the diners, like three stores in that little town, and we're sitting at the diner, and here comes this rig, and I said, huh, because I had heard a helicopter before, um, when this rig came into town, and there's not a lot of aircraft traffic in that little town, right? So, and then here come the SUVs. So truck driver has to get out, eat somewhere. They made everybody leave the diner, the SUVs in the parking lot, so that the big rig driver can eat. And there is armed people, military, all around that SUV and in that diner. So,
yeah, I heard about
yeah.
them doing that. A guy I think he got a job. He was doing a job, and his boss called, and he's like, "Drop the trailer. You're going here." And he's like, "Well, where am I going?" And they said, "You're going to this base. I can't remember where it was, but it's called, they call them DUMBs, Deep Underground Military Base." And he said he pulled up, and they essentially checked his rig, and they swept it for whatever radiation, whatever, and he got hooked up, and he just got put in a room. He's like, "You sit here. We'll take care of your truck. We'll come and get you when it's ready to go." And like an hour or two goes by, they come in. They're like, "Okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna get in your truck. You're gonna go here. You're gonna drive until you can't either run out of gas or you have to use the bathroom, and you have to call us when you're gonna do either of those things. Do not stop for nothing." And he said it was the most bizarre load he has ever picked up because they were just like, if he even wiggled a little bit, he got a phone call like, "What are you doing?" So whatever he had in the back of his rig was,
Yeah. So not Men in Black, but definitely government ops, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on out there, particularly around the nuclear type and weapon systems that we have. So,
yeah,
um,
who knows?
yeah. But anyway, fun episode. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it, and I want to hear from our viewers if anybody has ever had a Men in Black visit or know somebody who's had a Men in Black visit. I'd love to hear about it. But that's all we've got for today.
You've been listening to Speaking of Spirits, powered by Pocatello Paranormal Research in Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do us a favor and go to whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on and give us a review. We prefer the 5-star reviews. This helps us know how we're doing, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next podcast.